Today is Farrier Day, so Katerina is going to get her hoofs trimmed. She gets a barefoot trim, and this is Virgilio. Hi, Virgilio.
Hey there, how are you?
Good. So what's the first thing you do when you come to trim a horse's feet?
So the first thing we normally do is we actually watch the horse walk to us with the owner. We want to watch and see how she's landing and falling on her feet, hitting the ground, how the foot's coming off, and we're paying attention to see if there's any kind of growth in the medial or lateral side, which is the outside of the foot or the inside of the foot. Just basically getting an overall look of the actual horse right now. Once we get her on the tie rack, it's always nice to have a nice flat surface. As you can see, the mat is pretty flat. We try to watch and see her stand. We try to keep her in what's called a square position to keep her squared up. So she's kind of like looking like a little box. And this just allows me to see that bone coming all the way down to the ground, to see any kind of a hoof pastern axis angles. And it allows us to see if she's a little bit more pigeon-toed or cow-hocked or base narrow, which is when the chest is really narrow coming down with the feet. And at this point, the next best thing for us to do is actually walk over and look underneath the foot. Once we go and look at underneath the foot, we're able to, what we call mapping out the foot to see what we're gonna have to trim. To do the actual trim, we need very basic tools. We use stands for their feet, and all you really need is a rasp and a pair of nippers. And if you want to come around, we'll go ahead and start picking up our feet and take a look. Now, to pick up a horse's foot, it's always wise to let her know that you're coming, so she knows what we're expecting out of her and she kind of understands what's going on. If you start at their shoulder, you want to work your way down just so that she can understand to manipulate her weight. And you might want to come around this side now before we start cleaning her foot so you can see what I'm looking at. Okay, so the first thing we do is we hold the cannon bone at a 90 degrees just to look straight down and see it and see how the hoof is growing. It looks like she's growing a little bit more on the inside of the foot. That's called the medial side, which means she's probably bearing a lot more weight to the outside. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to clean this foot up, and we're going to do a very mild trim, leaving as much sole behind as possible so that we can use that as weight-bearing surfaces, and allowing her not to get sore-footed, which is, if there's a lot of sharp or hard area, for her to become a little tender.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So you're going to clean the foot out and then
Yep.
start your trim.
Absolutely.
Now, is it hard for the horse to hold their foot up so long?
No, and some horses, as they get older and they're a little more arthritic, you just got to work for what works for them. And sometimes we give them breaks. I don't need to have her foot up the whole time until I finish my job. We can set it down, come back to it. So just like you guys do before you ride a horse, you use a hoof pick and you start cleaning out all these little crevices, the frog, just to be able to see if there's anything getting caught up in there. Khat has actually a lot of sole, which is great and really aids her in allowing to have her barefoot. Some horses, they don't have as much depth to their sole, which is why we give the protection with the horseshoes. So the first thing I like to do is I like to carve out my frog, and this allows me to look straight down into the foot and map it out a little bit better and see how much I need to trim. And I'll do that to both sides.
So Virgilio, can you tell us a little bit about the frog?
Sure. So the frog is like a little cushion, which is almost kind of like a hydraulic system where they bring that weight down, and there's going to be weight bearing from heel to heel on the foot. But that center pressure that comes down is going to hit the frog, and you'll see some frogs kind of protrude a little bit more, which allows them to sink down and keep that angle of the hoof wall and pasture. But as a horse runs, you'll see that when they land, they'll come down and press with all that weight, because we have about 4 square inches of foot in a 900-pound horse that needs to be able to have weight-bearing surfaces. So what we like to do is keep as much of the healthy material as possible, because that's going to allow us to have all the protection that we need and that we can give the horse. And second of all, there's a lot of different areas that we look at. So on the bottom side, as we want to go ahead and level the foot from heel all the way to heel, making sure that it's nice and level so we don't have one side higher than the other, because when they put that weight down and there's any kind of alterations to that trim, you start affecting each joint going all the way up the arm and the leg of the horse. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to try to keep that flat balance. The next thing we're going to do...
Okay, so let me just stop you there for a second and get to the next one.